Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing cannabis yet again. And I didn't expect to make a video this soon, but quite a bit has happened, at least in the pages of the Bangkok Post. And just as a preface, sort of a tip of the hat to those folks over there, yeah, you guys are covering this pretty diligently. But we put up a video into last week, and we were talking about the possibility that things wouldn't be relisted. There was some pushback within the coalition. And then shortly after that, Bangkok Post put out, or shortly after we put up that article, or that video, they put out this article, Government United Despite Weed Policy U-Turn. And after reading that first one, I'll get into it in a minute, I thought about calling this article, or calling this video something along the lines of, methinks the Bangkok Post protests too much about unity or something, because they seem to reiterate unity. And I'll get into that in a moment. But that being said, I thought this excerpt from that article was especially noteworthy. Quoting directly, Deputy Prime Minister and Commerce Minister Phumtham Wechayachai insisted the government is still united despite recent hiccups with the plan to relist cannabis as a narcotic, adding that he already talked with Interior Minister Anutin Charnvirakul. As we discussed in a prior video that came out shortly before that article was published, we noted that the current Interior Minister, Kun Anutin, had discussed the fact that there would be pushback on this issue to relist, and that he thought folks should rethink this. And we also discussed the fact that apparently the Prime Minister is still open to rethinking this. Again, it's clearly not a foregone conclusion. It's still in discussion. That said, quoting further from that same article, I thought this was really interesting because, we have seen just a lot of spurious information, data points, if you will. They're not even data points because they're erroneous. It was like the notion that 20 billion baht had been spent by the hospital sector here in Thailand because of psychological cases involving cannabis, which was just, to my mind, a completely ridiculous sort of number, especially as we had seen, numbers associated with foreigner deaths here in Thailand, how that impacts the hospital sector. We discussed that years back on this channel. 20 billion baht was just an insane number. And then other things, polling about, when they said it didn't kill anybody, then they started saying, oh, it can drive people crazy. And they had various data on that all seemed pretty spurious. But that said, again, another data point which looks pretty solid to me, counteracting sort of all of this, frankly, static, if you want to call it that, or sort of just interference or non-information. I hesitate to use misinformation, disinformation. I don't like that terminology, but it's just not very good data. And then you counteract it with something like this, quoting directly, same article. Meanwhile, the Medical Cannabis Academic Network, led by Pantip Puanpongpan, Dean of College of Oriental Medicine at Rangsit University, submitted a letter to the NCB saying that the data provided by the Public Health Ministry is inaccurate and misleading. So bear in mind, this is a serious academic who's lodging this complaint, or lodging this sort of this letter, if you will. Quoting further, according to the letter, the ministry's report showed a discrepancy of 800% to 2,100% compared with statistics from the National Health Security Office, NHSO. So, wow, interesting stuff there where an academic is pointing out an 800 to 2,100% discrepancy in terms of numbers. I just, again, it seems like there's a lot of nonsense being rolled out and dressed up as reasoning for what it seems like a certain faction wants to do, but the data doesn't really support the reasoning behind this stuff. And getting into that further, so like I said, I thought of making a video where I said, I was kind of going to play on I think it's Shakespearean, methinks the lady doth protest too much, sort of talking a little too much about unity. And again, I've often wondered where the Bangkok Post stands on this. The article seemed a little bit negative. Well, over the weekend, then I came upon an opinion piece And the title of that is Put Weed Plan on Hold, Bangkok Post, bangkokpost.com. So this is a major piece in the Bangkok Post, and I think it's really worth noting because there's a lot of good information in here, and in my opinion, there's a lot of good reasoning in here. So quoting directly, the government, especially Health Minister Somsak Thepsutin, needs to immediately put on hold the plan to put cannabis back on the narcotics list and engage in dialogue on the issue with all stakeholders. Yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable at all. Rather than to just say, we're unilaterally by fiat going to make this major change to law and policy. Yeah, maybe talk to some of the people this is going to impact. That'd be a good idea. Quoting further, the decision to fast track the recriminalization of the herb is just arrogant, authoritative, and willfully ignorant of the importance of public participation in such policy shifts. It's been almost 2 weeks since a group of cannabis advocates known as Writing Thailand's Cannabis Future staged a demonstration in front of Government House. The group is demanding that the government form a joint panel to scientifically study the adverse impact of cannabis vis-a-vis tobacco and alcohol on users and society before deciding to classify the herb. Yeah, great idea to actually, let's do a comparative study, a real academic, rigorous, double-blind, whatever we got to do to get as accurate a data as we can. Let's compare this stuff. You know, what are the differences, the true differences to health and sort of your well-being from, you know, constant use maybe of cannabis versus constant use of alcohol, constant use of tobacco. These, you know, again, I find it fascinating that no one is saying the same, making these same health arguments with regard to tobacco, which is legal, or alcohol, which is legal, or the ever-present recreational use kind of chimera argument, which is a chimera at this point if you consider that nobody sits around asking about the recreational use of alcohol. It's silly. That said, quoting further, they said they would agree with the relisting should it be proven that cannabis has addictive properties akin to tobacco and alcohol. Again, I think that's a fair point. Quoting further, if not, the herb should be legally regulated and controlled in a more measured way, they contend. Yeah, better than, you know, this whole listing it as a narcotic is like using a mallet to go after a fly. I mean, it's really overkill. And quite honestly, it's not a very good tool to get the policy objective done, if you will. Quoting further, some cannabis advocates have even accused the government of having a hidden agenda. They argue that relisting cannabis would favor pharma giants, which conduct medical research and rob the people of their right to use a medicinal herb that can potentially heal several illnesses and improve their quality of life, especially for terminal stage cancer patients. Two cannabis advocates, Prasit Chai Nunwan and Akaradet Chakjinda, have been on a hunger strike since July 10 as their calls have fallen on deaf ears. The latter was even admitted to hospital. Yeah, it's serious stuff going on here with respect to that. I would like to point out, somebody in one of the comments in a prior video noted, and I don't want to take away the gravity of this situation, but it was kind of a worthy joke where they said, it's a little funny that cannabis advocates are on a hunger strike. It usually works the other way. But again, I don't want to take away any of the gravity from it, but you know, to kind of deflate deflate things a little bit or maybe bring some humor into it, I thought that was worth noting. Quoting further, it is a pity that Mr. Somsak has thrown cold water on their demands, arrogantly vowing to go ahead with recriminalizing cannabis no matter what. To back up his hasty plan, Mr. Somsak cited a survey showing what he described as, quote, massive and, quote, unequivocal support from the public for the move. Yeah, that was the thing where they just sort of rolled out a poll, which we have no idea what the parameters are and, you know, how it was conducted. And then just sort of said, well, because we conducted this poll, we're now going to change this policy in a major and substantial way. Honestly, that's just nonsensical. Again, I've said this from the beginning. Let's have Parliament do this. I mean, you know, and I'm tired of this, oh, we're a couple of guys in a room and we can do it because we say so logic too. Again, I get how it was delisted. We were operating under emergency powers then. We're not now. It's a totally different thing. Meanwhile, you know, we do have parliamentary mechanisms in place to deal with this, and this isn't an existential impending threat to anybody. It's not killing anybody. Dogs and cats are not living together. There's not mass hysteria. Society is not falling apart because this product exists on the market now. If anything, now that it's on the market, any move to relist it, as we've discussed, will have tremendous negative economic impact. As we discussed in a video, I think it went out last week, we're talking about a 27 billion baht hole that just immediately appears in the economy, to say nothing of the indirect impact on the commercial real estate sector here in Thailand, which has been a bright spot compared to the rest of the world, whose commercial real estate sectors are collapsing in real time in many cases because of changes to the market. Thailand now has this new product that requires a certain amount of commercial real estate to be utilized. Why not enjoy the benefit of that? I'm not understanding why this desire to just reverse all of that and sort of put us into a negative economic position. Quoting further, needless to say, the survey process is shrouded in mystery, suspicion, and a clear bias against cannabis by state agencies and some media. Policymakers need to make an informed decision based on well-balanced information. Yeah, that's well put. Well put, Bangkok Post. Quoting further, yesterday, Writing Thailand's Cannabis Future called off their protest campaign and launched their own panel to conduct scientific studies. Quote, the government has refused to provide a mechanism for rational, scientific-based discussion, so civic society has to launch its own, Mr. Prasit Chai said. Quoting further, he insists anti-cannabis groups comprising parents and young people as well as the Rural Doctors Society will be invited to join the study. Yeah, that was one where they said that the hundreds of thousands of young people had come out in favor of cannabis. Well, were they compelled to sign this petition because they were in school, for example, as part of, the decision to sign that petition? Again, you have to wonder if a certain amount of pressure, or at least encouragement, was provided to make such petitions. But fine, if we're going to have a big meeting on this and get everybody's sort of opinion, yes, please feel free to chime in. I get the thinking there. Quoting further, make no mistake, the previous government erred in rushing to decriminalize cannabis in the absence of proper regulations in 2022. Actually, you are making a mistake. As I've noticed in other videos, it was legalized in 2022. It was just legalized via a mechanism that was somewhat unorthodox and unique, but it was legalized nonetheless. As we've discussed in other videos, and yes, I'm a layman when it comes to Thai law, but the basic notions of the civil law come into play with this whole thing. And one of the most basic notions is the doctrine of codification. Under the civil law, something cannot be illegal unless you codify it as illegal, and that means you go through due legislative process to make that thing or that service or that whatever illegal. You can't just do it on the fly. You can't just do it unilaterally via ministerial regulations, basically because we say so approach. No, you have to go through due legislative process to make something illegal. That's sort of the way the civil law system, as opposed to the common law system, maintains liberty within their legal system. Quoting further, that resulted in a myriad of abuses like underage consumption that has wrongly intensified the stigma against the herb. Well, one, I think there's been a massive exaggeration in the media of this underage consumption. And as I've said in other videos, make it a criminal offense to sell to kids. I've got no problem with that. Do that. I don't think any reasonable person in the cannabis space wants this to be in the hands of children. What are you talking about? That's such a non-argument. In any event, quoting further, but no matter what the problems are, this herb is not the monster some are making it out to be. Yeah, exactly. I agree. Quoting further, the government should know it has come too far to reverse things now. Well, yeah, again, that goes back to the economic argument where, we're just going to literally, like with an ice cream scoop, just dig out 27 billion baht out of our economy at a time when the global economy is precarious. Now, I would argue Thailand's economy is far better than some are saying it is, because I think that some are trying to build the narrative for their own political purposes that Thailand is in a sort of a slump economically. Certain aspects of Thailand's economy are not doing as well as they once were, but as we noted in prior videos, the first quarter of this year was doing record numbers and consumer spending was way up. I have made the argument that there's something to be said for the notion that consumer spending may have been way up and tourism may have been way up because of cannabis, because of that attracting folks into this market. That being said, yeah, again, we've come too far and we're in an economically precarious situation. Does anyone think it's a good idea to just knock a 30 billion baht hole in the economy right now intentionally on something that, again, when you do the cost benefit analysis of it, it could be better for the country than alcohol or tobacco. And yet we're just going to unilaterally illegalize it again. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Quoting further, this herb, if well handled, can be a major cash crop, and as several advocates have insisted, it gives the public a certain degree of independence on matters of health. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and really at the end of the day, where is the exigent need for the government to be so involved in this at the end of the day? In any event, quoting further, moreover, there are signs that some cabinet ministers have distanced themselves from the move to relist cannabis as a narcotic. We've discussed that somewhat. I think maybe the momentum behind that is even continuing. Quoting further, by pushing it further, the government could face a rift. It would be wise for Mr. Somsak to think carefully and seek dialogue before making another mistaken move. You know, I do have to say, Bangkok Post, again, tip of the hat to you folks. I thought that was a very thoughtful editorial. I didn't agree with every little bit of it, but I think the overall logic is sound. We sort of are where we are at this point with regard to cannabis, and I think that there's a way to move forward that is both beneficial to the country and operates within the parameters of the way Thailand views the making of law and policy. But long story short, to just rashly change this could have a detrimental impact not only on the country as a whole, but also deeply detrimental impact on the economy, which right now nobody really needs that kind of problem, at least in my opinion.